I may be bad at VNDL, but do you know what I'm not bad at? Mainly because I already got all the bad endings, so I can't do any worse than that. Is plain Hello Lady. What a visual novel. It's how would I say? It's very interesting. That's the best way to put it. It is a very, very interesting visual novel, and not a bad way, obviously, but you know, especially with being introduced to Tamao and finding out that she's also been snooping around the school, it's definitely made me like her a lot more, even though she was already at the top of the list. But that's whatever, I guess. Either way, last time we played through, we got all the bad endings, like I said, in the transition. But after that, we finally entered Tamao's route, and the first thing we do is sneak around again, starting to sneak around again. And we wanted to go into the plant. That didn't work, and that plan failed because of Tamao. Or at that time, we didn't know it was Tamao. It was just a mysterious person dressed in all black, in the same way Narita was. The only reason Narita was able to know that Tamao was the one getting chased around was because of the panties that were exposed from her clothes getting cut by the crossbow bolts. Thanks for the hydrate. And the stretch. But, you know, Narita being a gentleman, being the gentleman he is, he helps her escape, dresses her up, and by dresses her up, I mean, you know, bandages. But, you know, if we're talking about dressing her up in the clothes sense, she was dressed down. But, you know, that was to put bandages on her. Did you see what I put in Discord? Yeah, I saw Neko Nin announcements. Neko Nin X Heart 2, X Heart Spin 2, and Neko Mimi Sweet Housemates Volume 2. And the Neko Para 10th anniversary Sayori artworks coming your way in 2026. Yeah. But, you know, I haven't gotten into the Neko Nin series yet. I have the first Neko Mimi housemates, whatever. Yeah, I have Neko Nin. Right? You know, we talked about it before. When I was going through my visual novels. I've got, where are they? Yeah, I've got Neko Nin X Heart, and then X Heart plus Nachi, and X Heart plus Saiha. As for the other Neko Nin, I am missing... Where are they? Oh, there they are. The Neko Nin X Heart list. Yeah, I'm missing 2. 2 Love Plus, 3, and then X Heart Spin and Spin Love Plus. So, you know, maybe I should play through Neko Nin X Heart first before I get into the rest of the series. Oh yeah, and then also Neko Mimi. I don't know if that's on Steam. It isn't. I want Nekomimi. What's the difference? Nekomimi. Sweet housemates. Because here's the thing, right? They are fairly short visual novels. Where is it? No lolly in Nekonin. Well, I guess that explains why the another fucking... Oh, this... See, this time... It's because I had to type in the dash. I had to type in the hyphen, which is my mute button. I forgot to unmute. But, yeah. Whatever. Stop talking about another visual novel. We're playing through Hello Lady. Either way, enough rambling on, or not in my case because I accidentally forgot to unmute. Let's get into it. That's not what I meant to click on. I clicked on the wrong thing. Shut up. The ashen night sky changed into a light purple, and then a fiery red. A new dawn was rising. The hectic night had finally reached its end. Tamao snuck out of Narita's bed, dragging her wounded body away. Actually, maybe I need to double check something. Because, I was a bit curious. I was a bit curious and looked at, looked up the, I may have installed the 18 plus patch to check how different the scene, the last scene was, and it wasn't that different. The only change was when Tamao was running around. Other than that, it was basically the same, right? Her arm was still in the way of her tits in that sprite, even in the 18 plus version, and there wasn't any color seen behind the arm. So I may have been wrong in assuming that, they potentially drew out the nipples. Tamao snuck out of Narita's bed, dragging her wounded body away. She realized the danger of the others finding out that she had been in Narita's room the whole night, so she tried to get back to hers as soon as possible. Speaking of the owner of this room, he had fallen asleep on the sofa after letting Tamao have the bed.
大物だよな。この状況でのんきに寝てやがる。人の気も知らないで。俺が寝首かいたらどうすんだよ。
Who's we? You're in a tense situation, alright? Narita's fine. He'll, if you try anything on him, he'll wake up immediately. You won't be able to do anything. He seems stranger and stranger to her by the day. The weird things he'd told her last night left her grasping for answers. Beautiful, cute. That was the first time someone had praised her so wholeheartedly. Where Tamao was from, beauty was merely considered another card to play.
お前みたいなやつ、初めてだよ。
You've never met anyone into tomboys? He had also suggested that they investigate the secrets of the academy together. That part is different. That part is uncommon. And
私は一人の学友として君の身を案じ、君が危険に踏み込まないことを願っている。
学友だとかさ。
She didn't want him to say that. She could understand if it came from Saku or any of the other girls. They knew nothing, so they obviously believed her to be a fellow student. Shinri Narita, on the other hand, was a sharp weirdo. He must have understood why Tamao snooped around the academy. Despite that,
俺はなんだっけ。そう、ロンリーソルジャーなんだよ。ずっとな。
You don't have to be a lonely soldier anymore. Eru had explained that expression to her. The girl had a tendency to pick up various phrases from her manga and games, and Tamao had heard her use the term to describe her. What was Shinri Narita's goal? There was no doubt he was hiding something. However, she felt he was unlike her employers.
まさか、マジに俺の体を狙って？
I mean, that's kind of a byproduct of his actual goals.
いや、そんなバカな、成田が俺を、そんなバカな。
She denied her own words with all her might.
意外と学友だから心配したってのが本気で。 いいやつだったりするのかな。
No, that was a bad way to look at it. He was a perv who bundled on first meeting, a weird freak whose motives remained a mystery. She couldn't lower her guard around him. Not because he knows her secret, but because she has tits. The fact that he discovered her secret was a major failure on her part. It was impossible to predict his actions. If he did something that drew the Academy's attention to them, that'd be the end of her. She had gotten so close, yet it would all go to waste. It was probably safer to cooperate with and keep an eye on him regardless of what his goals were.
こいつ俺のことを助けたんだよな。
Impossible. In Tamao's world, it was normal to cut off any dead weight, and yet he put himself in danger to save Tamao's life. Yeah, and he died in one round, but, that's because I chose the obviously dangerous option.
余計なことは考えるな。スイッチを入れろ、俺。仕事の最中に気を取られたら命取りになるぞ。よし、こんな変態のことなんてもうどうでもいい。爆睡している今のうちにさっさと出ていこうっと。
With the amount of noise you're making, I'm surprised he's not awake. As she walked to the door, she looked back at the sofa as if she'd forgotten something. Naruto was still fast asleep, and so she wondered how defenseless the proud pervert was in that state. I can guarantee you, he isn't as defenseless as you think he is. A bit interested, she snuck toward the sofa. He slept with his face facing the back of the sofa, so that was the only way to get a good look at it. He slept with his face facing the back of the sofa, so that was the only way to get a good look at it? What? She closed in on him and extended her neck. The man had a weird set of skills. Drawing too close in the wrong way could have alerted him. Keeping her distance and her heart steady, she looked at him. A bit closer. Just a bit closer.
俺何やってんだか。
She returned to her senses when she spotted one of Naruto's eyes in his nose. Why was she even interested in his sleeping face? She'd been acting like some schoolgirl. Because you are. Just because you're being hired by someone to infiltrate the school doesn't mean you aren't a student here. Well, she was, but that wasn't the real her. Okay, see, she acknowledged it. Just like Naruto. The funny thing about this route is that both Naruto and Tamao have separate goals aside from trying to blend into the school. Have different reasons to infiltrate the school, but both of them are going to, slowly push that aside and prioritize more of the other person. That's a bad way of saying it, but in the bad end where Naruto started to just act more like a student and not try to accomplish what his original goals were. Wouldn't Tamao have been the same? I don't know what the right way to put it would be. So I'm just going to I'm gonna give up. God damn it, I pressed spacebar. In fact, she hadn't been at her best since Naruto transferred in. He drove her insane. Ignoring the pain, she picked up her clothes and quickly got dressed. Then she shook off any unnecessary thoughts like a dog covered in water and escaped the room. That fucking transition. I felt Tamao walk away. I'd woken up when she squirmed to get out of bed, but her silence made it clear that she wanted to sneak out. I didn't want to ruin it for her, so I just kept my eyes closed. Tamao stuck around for a lot longer than I'd expected, but after mumbling some things I couldn't quite make out, she left the room. Yeah, I couldn't quite make them out too, but that's because I have a feeling the voice volume is a little lower than it should be for this kind of game. I heard a light sigh as the door closed. It seemed I was alone yet again. I knew full well that I'd chosen a dangerous path. Joining forces to cooperate against the Academy seemed logical, but it came with the risk of her discovering my goals and identity. The best course of action was to act like nothing had happened, and that was exactly what I would have done if she hadn't said those words.
そういうわけにいくかバカ!
It was a scream without a hint of falsehood in it, and it gave me the urge to help her. Why though? That's because you like her. I asked myself that question, but I failed to figure out a clear answer. I had other choices. What kept me from choosing them? Was I just being sympathetic, or had I done it because I considered her a friend? A friend, eh? How foolish. Shinri Naruto was an Avenger, and the Academy was merely a means to reach his target, a stage on which he planned to enact his revenge. If I had warmed up to it so much that I'd formed attachments, had I not also developed new weaknesses? I had to be more careful than ever before. I couldn't allow Tamao to discover my true identity.
自分で選んでおきながら厄介なことだ。
The person I'd invited in had left, making my small personal space feel more quiet than ever. Come morning, I made my way to Mr. Kina's lessons in the large classroom where I found Tamao meekly sitting at her seat with the other crowns. Do you have any theories so far you want to talk about? No, because I don't know what questions I need to ask. Right? Because most of the questions I would have asked have already been answered. Right? Like, well, the main one is who is Narita after, but, you know, considering that there is someone in the Academy named Mikado, I think we know who he wants to kill. Especially since Kurofune was the one who burned down the estate, I guess. Speculate any others? I mean, you know, he did say there were two other people, and the second person was also, because here's the thing, right? Hanazono brought up two people, one being Kurofune and the other being Sarako's dad, right? That was the last name that he said, right? The last name of the other person he said. So, you know, is that not the other target? She usually jumped into the class moments before it began, but today she's arrived a whole 15 minutes early. Hell must have frozen over.
どうかしたの？朝から様子がおかしいわよ。心配事とか？相談事とかあったら力になるよ。別に何でもねえってば。きっと病気です。ノーノ。
It definitely has something to do with her mental, but I don't think it's an illness. Tamao had been acting strange since our breakfast at the dorm, which drew the attention of her considerate friends. She stared at nothing, spaced out a lot, and walked so unsteadily that she crashed into walls multiple times. Last night's events must have bothered her. I worried that she might fail to keep our secret for long. I had to calm her down.
おはよう、玉尾。昨夜は大変ではなかったかね。
Ancient wisdom said that all illnesses started in the mind. Worry ruined the balance of the body and freed up room for physical ailments. Thus, I cheerfully called out to her, hoping to dispel her gloominess. Tamao jumped up like she'd found an explosive, with only a few seconds left on the timer, making the others turn to look at me. A day's worth of expressions graced her face within half a second. She was trying to figure out what I meant by something.
私が起きる前にいなくなっていたので心配したが、ちゃんと投稿していたようで安心し。
She realized that none of the somethings were good, so she jumped out of her chair and closed my mouth. To outsiders, it looked like we're just playfully messing around. The gap between us had clearly closed, so the other girls looked at us with perplexed eyes.
一体何事？新手の HMI による攻撃？
Do not make a JoJo's reference. You aren't allowed to make a fucking JoJo's reference.
玉緒ちゃん、昨日まで成田くんとは喧嘩ばかりしてたのに、いつの間にか仲良くなれたんだ。そんなご都合主義があるわけねえと言いますか。ぶっちゃけデジャブ
Deja vu for who? I wonder. I wonder who Eru is referring to. I'm not looking at anyone at the moment. Definitely not looking at Sorako.
自分、先々週ぐらいに空子から似たような目に遭わされた記憶がある気がします。冗談きついです。マジなら最悪。超最悪。
I don't know what you're talking about, Eru. Nothing happened with Sorako. She definitely didn't immediately start feeding Narita after she was saved by him. I mean, you know, a few things happened in between him, in between Sorako being saved and her feeding Narita, but you don't need to worry about that. Actually, no, she already knows. The girls already know that Sorako was groped by Narita.
違うってだから成田の口元に蚊が
ペロ。
Tamao used quite a lot of force, so I reflexively stuck out my tongue and licked her palm. Oh, how I love the taste of a maiden's skin in the morning. Tamao turned pale and jumped back while Saku pointed at me with a... That was rather rude. I honestly wanted to suggest she rethink her actions.
成田、朝から悪ふざけのしすぎは困ります。
I mean, you know...
すまない。玉緒の反応が愛らしいので、つい舌が出てしまった。
As Tamao fell silent, the others parted like the Red Sea.
愛らしい？いえ、これはこれで成田らしいかも。でも、そんなまさか。
そうなの。まさか玉緒ちゃんも。
A complicated, uncomfortable silence. Luckily, Eru broke it.
うっざ、のろけ最悪。マジ最悪。
With that, the flow of time resumed. Tamao glared at me, then backed off to form a circle with the others and tell them something. Class was about to start, so I took my usual seat next to Saku, but this time another man also sat nearby.
今のはガールズトークというやつかな。
Taigi Mikado, the son of Korofune Mikado, as well as the 7th Etoel, who had joined us 2 weeks ago.
一夜明ければ君と玉緒くんは随分と仲良くなっている。不思議なことだね。
昔から男女の仲とは不思議なものだというらしい。
Taigi and I spoke to each other like we'd been friends for a decade.
落ち着いてたまおちゃん。教室で暴れたらまた備品壊して時の先生に怒られちゃうよ。
Tamao overheard us and started to snap, but Sarako stopped her.
男女の仲というよりも人の心というべきだろうね。かくも騒がしく不可思議なものは他にはない。
なるほど、確かにその通り。
騒ぎといえばちょっとした噂があるんだが、成田、君は夜更かしをする方かな？
No. I go to bed very early, I'll have you know.
何でも昨夜学園の敷地内でトラブルが起きたらしい。遅くまで起きていたのなら何か見たり聞いたりしなかったかな？
He muttered that as though it was no big deal, then looked at me with the cold and completely uncaring eyes I'd grown used to over the past 2 weeks. Like always, he tried to peer deep into my heart.
昨夜は日付が変わるまで起きていたが、残念ながら寮の近くでは何事もなかった。
Thus, I donned the mask of the normal me.
だろうね。その噂によると騒ぎは森でだそうだ。
では知る由もないな。
Tamao overheard us and tensed up, but I pretended not to notice.
大義が興味を持っているのであれば、私も耳をそば立てておくとしよう。何か手がかりが得られたなら、我が友人にすぐさま伝えるために。
ただの噂だよ。気にするほどのものじゃない。
Soon enough, Mr. Kino entered the classroom.
それでは本日の講義を始めます。
Thus, our everyday life continued. Her shadow slid through the academy at night. Its silhouette resembled an agile beast, but it was hard to spot when mixed with the stationary shadows. It was Tamao Akihito, and she had been sneaking past security.
さてと。
She isn't dressed up in anything. She stopped at a spot next to the school building with no cameras, that no cameras reached. Remembering what happened that morning made her sigh. She was a little worried, but as promised, Narita hadn't revealed her secret. In fact, he had just used it to crack a joke, which didn't sit right with her, but she couldn't ignore it. She could ignore it. Her chest pounded. She put her hand on her mouth and pondered her predicament. Him finding out her secret was an even bigger problem than she'd initially thought. Naruto was a weirdo after all. She couldn't count on him to cooperate, nor did she want to. Tamao had done fine by herself thus far. She was a model lonely soldier. However, her thoughts had been going in circles since noon. If she didn't have to cooperate with him, she could have just refused. Sure, she wanted to keep him from doing anything weird, but that felt like an excuse. After all, she also had the option of silencing him for good. No. Why did she decide to trust the promise of a man like him? She didn't understand. Was she just confused because he was the oddest man she'd ever met? All that aside, there was something worth celebrating. Her true self, which had to stay hidden at all costs, remained a secret to the Crowns.
こんなの教えられるわけないよな。
And not anytime soon. It's gonna happen eventually. And potentially, it's gonna happen without your consent, but it's gonna happen eventually. Either you reveal it or it's going to be revealed by someone else. The real Tamao Akihito lived in a completely different world than those girls. There was something else to consider. Taigi Mikado, the new student who joined right after Mitori left. He was the son of Chairman Korifune Mikado, and that meant he was no normal student. She felt like Taigi had been watching her. It seemed almost like he suspected her of hiding something. And Taigi also kept an eye on Narita, though the gaze he aimed at him felt somewhat different. Whatever the case, she didn't have much time left. Her wound still pained her, but she had to dig out the Academy's secrets as soon as possible.
今夜は様子を見るだけのつもりだったけど。
I wonder how much... I wonder how... How would I say this? Like, surely Taigi doesn't know Narita's real identity, but I wonder if he's suspicious of, you know, or maybe he does know. Maybe he does know that Shunsui Mikado is still alive. That was why she'd ventured out in her school uniform. However, she was still willing to go the whole way. She moved her hand away from her mouth and formed a fist. She just remembered that Narita licked that hand earlier in the day. What kind of person did that? Anyway, upon remembering the sensation of his tongue, she turned red in the face.
いやいや、頭おかしいぞ。絶対成田のやつは。
She shook her head and chased those unnecessary thoughts away. After confirming that no one was around, she ran off towards the windowless building. When Tamao dashed off, her surroundings had been completely empty. However, as soon as she left, a shadow slinked off a column near the garden, revealing a certain man. It was I. Shinri Narita. I'd secretly followed her, but she put some major distance between us in the blink of an eye.
焦って無理な行動に出るのではないかと気をつけていてよかったというところだろうか。
But I hadn't done that. So now Tamao was dashing about. Not only was she still hurt, but she wasn't in the state of mind. Wasn't in the right state of mind either. So she hadn't even noticed that I was following her.
本当に無茶をするものだね。
Stop using that transition. Despite last night's events, the ominous forest surrounding the tower hadn't upped its security. Needless to say, it was because reinforcements would merely have gotten in the way. The area was already under the protection of the mystical forest and the mysterious marksman. It was a wall that turned the tower into an impenetrable fortress.
やれる。今夜は行ける。あのガーディアンは片付ける。こっちの姿を見たやつ、全員始末する。
I would highly recommend against this. She crouched in the shadows like a highly strung bow and prepared to break through the security. Suddenly,
こんばんは。
Unexpected as much, but she noticed me before I even touched her shoulder. She jumped about 4 meters away and looked at me, clearly shocked.
アリタ、またお前かよ。
そう、また私だ。やはり夏の夜の散歩は気持ちがいいものだね。
なんでわざわざ邪魔しに来やがったんだよ、てめえは。
She glared at me like I was a piece of gum stuck through her shoe. Tamao looked charming even when mad.
冷静さを失っているのではないかね。状況をよく考えてみることだ。
うっせえ、俺のどこが冷静じゃないってんだ。頭なら十分冷えて、これ以上面倒増やすな。
She waved me off and tried to walk away, but I grabbed her arm to stop her.
この通り、玉緒の怪我はまだ癒えていない。それに昨日の今日だ。罠の一つでも張って待ち構えているとすれば、それこそ全てが水泡に帰するだろう。狂犬の無謀と虎の強胆を履き違えて、それで満足か、赤人玉緒。
それは。
She tried to argue, but simply hung her head and bit her lip instead.
無謀にあえて踏み込まねばならないのが戦いであるように、流行る自分を殺して耐えるのもまた戦いではないのかね。
Voicing her shame, she clenched her fist so tight that I expected it to bleed. After Tamao calmed down, we left the forest. However, instead of the dorm, we chose to head somewhere close, somewhere outside the academy. A partner as capable as Tamao made exiting through the route I'd used with Ero a simple matter.
どうしてわざわざ外へ出るんだ？
学園の敷地ではどこから監視されていないとも限らない。それにあそこには200人の HMI がいる。重要な相談をするのであれば、学園から離れた方が確実に安全だろう。
重要な話か。
We stood on the road some distance away from the academy. It was an open space, so if anyone approached, we'd know it. Saying nothing, I looked up at the moonlit clouds above and waited for her to speak. She mirrored my actions at first, but eventually she broke the silence.
なあ、成田。お前、俺の素性とか目的とか、どれぐらい見当ついてる？
そうだな。確証があるわけではないが、おおよそは分かっていると思ってもらっても結構だ。
なんだと？なぜバレた？いやいや、鎌掛けかもしれねえ。全力で白切るぞ。
You're not doing a very good job of that one. In 4/5 of a second, her expression shifted a number of times, providing insight of her thought process.
玉尾はどこまでも正直者だな。こんな仕事に従事させておくには惜しい人材だ。
いやいや待て、分かったって何にだ？俺を何だと思ったんだ？
いいのかね、言葉にしても。大層恥ずかしいことになるかもしれないが。
恥ずかしいって何よ？成田の言うことは全然信用できねえ。本当に分かってるなら言ってみろよ。
She leveled an intense glare at me, and for whatever reason, it felt intoxicating. In fact, if I waited long enough, that may have been turned into a form of pleasure. After enjoying her gaze for a moment, I presented my case.
玉尾は一種のエージェントだ。何らかの機関の一員、あるいはその命令で行動している。つまり学園と良好な関係とは言えない組織の総区というわけだ。目的は学園に隠されている秘密の追求、あるいは機密の入手といったところか。個人的な見解で言わせてもらえるなら前者だろ
う。根拠は？
人選だ。産業スパイの類として投入されるにしては、玉尾はいささか素直すぎる。
Her reaction to my earlier words made that rather evident. Tamao wore her emotions on her sleeve, which no real pro would have ever done. Only HMIs could enroll in the academy, which explained why they picked her.
よりによって成田にって。
Like I'd predicted, she seemed embarrassed.
それでは、おおむね当たっているのかね。
Instead of replying, she reached for my throat, as if her hand was a knife. The Tamao from before had disappeared. The bashful maiden, with an indomitable glare, had vanished without a trace.
玉尾、君に人が殺せるのかね。
簡単だ。殺すもバラすも止めるも埋めるも何もかもあっという間だ。それっきりで後腐れもない。
She wasn't lying. To Tamao, killing was as simple as brushing her teeth. Where had Tamao hidden this cold, blood-stained murderer?
お前が邪魔なら。例えば、俺を狙ってどこからか送り込まれたやつなら、俺は迷わずそうなる。
You can try.
この私が誰かの下について働いたりするように見えるのかね。
まあ、見えねえな。
She moved her head around in thought, and then relaxed and nodded.
じゃあ、もう成田には隠してる意味ないな。お前相手だと嘘ついても見抜かれそうだし。
おとなしく諦めて詳しいところを話したまえ。そうでなければ私も手の貸しようがない。
偉そうなやつだな。状況分かってんのかおい。てめえ今口を塞がれるかどうかの瀬戸際だぞ。
それは恐ろしい。そういうことなら玉緒のメイドプレゼントを期待してもよいのかね。
After thinking about the situation and sighing, Tamao spoke up.
それと言っとくけど、俺メイドじゃねえから。
You were in his dreams, though.
大雑把には成田の言う通りだよ。天下はノーブルスクールには黒い裏がある。
帝黒船は持ち前の政治力を駆使してスクールの運営に政財界からの強い後押しを得ている。多少の不祥事なら問題にはならないはずだ。
That explained why the attack on Saku never made it to the news. Yeah, minor disturbances like being held at gunpoint or a building getting blown up.
なのに黒船の敵対者が弾を差し向けたのは噂の中身がそれさえ吹き飛ばしかねない黒船にとってまさに命取りのアキレス腱だからか。
お前ほんと話の早いやつだよ。そういうわけで俺は学生としてここにやってきたってわけ。
目的のために潜入したにしては学友たちとも親しんでいる様子だったがね。
You've been integrated too well into you've integrated too well into the school system.
うるせえ、馴染んでる方が怪しまれないだろうが。
玉緒の顔を立ててそういうことにしておこう。
She turned red and bit her lip. I had a hard time keeping a straight face when I saw that. Thinking it was her turn, she pointed at me.
詮索なしって約束だったけど、結局こっちのことを話したぞ。俺にも成田に聞きたいことがある。おとなしく答えてもらうぜ。
Thanks for the hydrate. And the stretch.
好きなチャイナドレスの色は赤だ。それから日本の父兄の制服は旧制服の方が。
そんなこと聞いてねえよ。
I know the first thing. I don't know the second one. She cut my words short.
残念だ。個人的にこの話題なら3日3晩は話し続けられるというのに。
聞きたくもねえ。そうじゃなくて、俺が聞きたいのはお前がどういうつもりかだ。お前だって目的があってこの学園に来た口なんだろ。
Tamao looked up and glared at me.
その通り。この私も玉緒と同じ穴のタイガーだ。
最初からてめえは怪しいと思ってたんだよ。
She nodded and proudly puffed out her chest. She even crossed her arms in front of them. Tamao looked extremely lovable when she got uppity, so I chose not to ruin the fun.
で、てめえの目的は？
Kill Korofune Mikado.
私は玉緒の目的を当ててみせた。私の目的を知りたければ同じようにしてみるというのはどうかね。
当たったら答えるんだな。よし。じゃあこの学園の秘密を探りに来た。
外れだ。ではこの質問はこれまでということに。
お前本当だろうな。マジ外れなんだろうな。当たってるのをごまかしてんじゃねえだろうな。
もちろん嘘は言わない。
Yeah, he would never lie to a maiden. She glared at him with a hint of suspicion in her gaze, but quickly understood that that line of questioning was a waste of time and moved on.
じゃあどうして俺に手を貸してくれるんだ。
どうして手を貸してくれるのかとは。
Most people would have assumed I planned to use them, but the way she put it made her sound grateful. Her innocent mind did not suit someone sent to infiltrate the academy at all.
私も学園の秘密には興味がある。そう考えてもらって結構だ。だが、それだけではなく。
だけでないんなら何なんだ。
この模式を持っている相手を手助けしたいと願うのは当たり前ではないかね。
I could have lied, but Tamao was so straightforward that I wanted to be honest with her. Honestly, the strangest thoughts kept flowing into my head.
へえ、なるほど。この模試。
After she repeated that word, her brain caught up to the situation and she froze. She turned as red as a raging fire. The color even reached up to her ears.
てめえ、成田、なんで俺を、成田、なんで？
美しいものに惹かれるのは人として当然だよ。
She'd finally realized that I was quite serious about her. How absurd and foolish. That may have been a natural emotion for a person, but I was an inhuman avenger. Plus, the maiden who'd enchanted me was someone who had the potential to end up as an enemy. Yeah, but you can prevent that. And yet, oh my, there was no turning back.
玉緒の純粋でまっすぐな心はとても綺麗だ。
純粋？何が？成田、何？マジ私なんでですか？
I placed my hand on my chest. My hands had lost everything. My entire clan had died. My hands had lost everything. My entire clan had died, yet I'd survived for no apparent reason. I'd crawled forward using rage as fuel and stood up due to the immense hatred in my heart. However, those same hands suddenly felt a certain warmth. Oh, there's the three. Sorako, Tagi, and Ruri. I remembered her name. I reminisced about the sky I'd gazed up at a long ago. How strange. After so long, I'd started to feel a most human emotion once more.
復讐者には無用のものではないのか。一振りの剣、一個の弾丸として旧敵を殺す好みには余る。捨て去るべき人がましさではないのか。
But what is Ruri's relation to Eru? You know?
違う。
Especially in how similar they look to each other. No, this human heart could not be cast aside. Revenge was a solemn prayer for the dead, something that only humans could enact. If I only clung to sweet, sweet hatred, I was no better than the traitors, a beast in the hide of men. Is it? No, that's how it's spelled.
何言ってんのあんた？マジで？なんで？
Or is it HYDE? Never mind. Or maybe he actually is using the word hide in the verb. The verb, I mean. The unexpected situation had thrown her for a loop. A rather delicious reason. If the night wind hadn't cooled them off, my cheeks would have warmed.
玉は私が嫌いかね。
I took a step forward, closing the distance between us.
いや、別に嫌いではないけれども、でもほら、なんだ。
よく考えて答えてほしい。嫌っているというなら、これ以上何もしない。だが、そうでないのなら、私はきっとためらわない。
嫌いではないぞ。本当に全然嫌いじゃない。むしろ、いや嫌いじゃないぞ。でもお前は本当に何を？
玉を。
成田。
I drew closer and forced her to face me. Tamao found herself unable to look at me in the eye. So she attempted to escape. She seemed so flustered that her usual physical prowess had vanished. She failed to even stand straight, and so I held onto her shoulders so hard it might have actually hurt. It was night, and we were under a bright moon. It was a world of our own, and I did nothing but look at her. Unable to bear my gaze, she looked in random directions.
タマオ、こっちを向いてほしい。
はい。
After letting out that strange meek response, she gave in and looked back at me. Her bewitching lips shook due to the tension in the air.
タマオの気持ちをはっきりと聞かせてほしい。
気持ちって何のこと？
She reflexively tried to get away again, but I didn't let her.
私は赤ひとタマオに好意を抱いている。タマオは私に対してどういう感情を抱いているのか。どう？
Oops. I'm sure that was the rest of the sentence. I'm sure that the sentence ended there. She fell silent as though some bread had gotten stuck in her throat. I waited without looking away from her for even a second. The wind whipped at a swift speed, so 3 clouds had already passed by the moon above. The 4th cloud that came was large enough to cover the whole thing, granting us a moment of merciful darkness. Tamao's expression became impossible to make out, and she let out a whisper.
キルイさん。
Her silent voice seemed extremely clear to me. She just repeated herself, but her red visage and her voice, which quivered like a newborn deer's, revealed exactly how she felt. A warm joy filled my heart. It felt much like the sweetness of a piece of candy in my mouth. A taste of sin and foolishness, surely. I closed my eyes and savored the sweet, forbidden smell, and by the time I reopened them, the clouds had cleared. Flushed all over, biting down on her lip, the moonlight let me see Tamao clearly. I gave in to the urge and pulled her into me. Oh, hell no! This is a bit quick. Olive's joined. I press spacebar again. Hers were both tough and so soft you'd think they might melt. My senses were overwhelmed by Tamao and Tamao alone. The scent of her hair, which came from the expensive soap she'd used, mixed with the bittersweet feminine smell from her neck. Okay. I heard her lightly moan in surprise and squirm, uncertain how to react. Her cheeks felt soft and warm, and her silky hair danced in the wind. After feeling her with all my senses, I slowly backed away. It looked like she was still processing everything that had happened.
失敬した。あまりにタマオが可愛かったものだから。
俺、初めての。
Her first kiss, I assumed.
そんないきなり。さっきの初めてのキス。
She hung her head and shivered. Her clenched hands turned pale as she grabbed her skirt and wrinkled it.
素晴らしかったよ、タマオ。君の行為に感謝する。
何が バカ、クソてめえ死ね、変態なりと死ね、クソ、バカ、クソ。
Her curses made me worried that I'd upset her. She'd hidden her face, so I snuck a peek at it. Luckily, it ended up being absurdly easy to tell that she was smiling. Her joy, honestly, even felt infectious. The moonlight showering her made me want to keep gazing at her, but it was far too late in the night for that.
タマオ、そろそろ戻った方がいいだろう。サクたちに不在が知られると面倒なことになる。
Yeah, let's sneak in through my room window again. Tamao returned to her senses, looked up at the position of the moon to calculate the time, and quickly understood what I was saying. Then she turned all red and opened her mouth once more.
こんなことでごまかされたりしないからな。お前の正体、絶対掴んでやるからな。
Well, you know, if you knew who he really was, I don't think there would be much of a difference in your relationship towards him, except for the fact that, you know, his last name matches up with the principals, but he doesn't seem to like Kurofune that much.
やはり個人の言う通り、女心とは複雑なものだね。
A car approached us, traveling down the road in the dark. And the headlights eventually hit our position. However, when they did, they found no trace of even a single soul. I returned to my room without anyone noticing. Tamao must have done the same. I had enough trust in her skills to know she'd be successful. Then I took a seat, realized that my day was done, and cleared up my senses. After confirming that there was no one around, there was no one nearby, I opened an envelope. I had found it in the dorm's mailbox when I went down to the living room. It was from my dearest maid. It was a feminine pink and had an odd seal affixed to it that looked like a round green orb with limbs striking a pose. Isn't that the same design as the plush that he has? The very same design as the odd plush toy she'd given me when I'd moved here. I was right. It suited her taste perfectly.
最近ではメール全盛だが、やはり手紙には独特の風情があって良いものだね。
Yeah, it's a lot harder to not trace, but it's a lot harder to discard. It's a lot harder to destroy. I don't remember the word.
ご主人様、良き学園生活を楽しんでおられるでしょうか。独善的で尊大、身勝手な態度を直す機会になればと医者は願っております。おとといは車を出してもらい、身の回りの土地を一回りしてまいりました。行楽日和の日で、うんと羽を伸ばすことができました。ご主人様はどうぞ、2年か3年留年、目いっぱい学園を楽しんでくださいませ。
Oh, we already got that bad ending.
それから素晴らしい地方の名物料理もいただいてきました。いとわしいお荷物なしでの休暇は最高でございます。いずれご主人様が戻れば、美味しい話だけお聞かせしましょう。
After I finished reading her letter, I nodded. It looked like mere small talk at first, but that was actually camouflage to avoid prying eyes. It was a code that had to be deciphered, though she also simply enjoyed doing such things. Everything is going as planned, transitioning to the second act. Good. Revenge was a stage dedicated to the dead, and the next phase was set to begin. A lament for the lost, a fitting punishment for the sinners. I sized myself up in the large mirror in my room. A large grin adorned my face, revealing a fang. I'd started smiling unconsciously out of a twisted sense of joy. It was the complete opposite of how I'd felt around Tamao, a dark joy.
やめろ。
Revenge was a solemn prayer. It had to be conducted with anger and delivered with hate. raising a fist filled with joy, threatened to sully its sanctity.
やめろ
Stop thinking about Tamao when you're trying to think about killing Kurofune. I sunk the heavy sin deep into my chest and did my best to form Shinri Narita's usual expression.
それにしてもひしやめ。暗号のついでに本音まで書き連ねるとは、実によくできた次女だ。
She seemed far too worried, though. Everyone in the academy loved and respected me. I'm sure they do.
さて、また明日に備えるとしよう。
I casually folded the letter and prepared to sleep. They're not going to get rid of it? The next morning, I woke up after a decent rest. Awakening to the clear blue sky and the songs of the birds, I did my daily breathing exercise in the nude. Lastly, I took a couple showers, some so hot they burned, some freezing, and they woke me up completely. In a great mood, I put my clothes on and prepared to leave, but then I sensed something outside my door. I had a general idea who it was. Holding my breath, I focused my senses.
おはよ
Apparently it was Tamao. She muttered things as she walked back and forth near my door, that repeated countless times, making her seem a bit suspicious.
うよう成田これは軽すぎる Good morning こんなってどうする俺玉を
Also, she was not... Hang on a minute.
Good morning
That was not French, okay? She was speaking fucking English. From what I could tell, she came to greet me, but didn't know how. Rather adorable, really. Tamao appeared perplexed. The events that had transitioned last night constantly replayed in her mind, and they hadn't disappeared even when she went to bed. Her blossoming feelings left her unable to sleep. Her steps were unsteady. She ended up not getting a wink of sleep, but she wasn't the type to break down just because of that. She simply worried because she didn't know what was happening to her. She unconsciously got up and dressed herself, then found herself outside her room before she even realized. Looking up, she caught sight of the door to Narita's room.
何をやってるんだ俺は
She put her face in her hands and scratched her head, making a mess of her just washed hair.
挨拶ただの挨拶そうだよ同じエトワールだし同じ寮で住んでるんだから挨拶ぐらいするだろそうそう
Listen, Tamao, I don't think you need to worry about your hair getting messed up, okay?
だからたださりげなく朝の挨拶をしてあとはそうあわよくばそのまま一緒に教室まで
If possible, what did that mean? Almost overwhelmed by feelings she refused to acknowledge, she screamed and ran away like a rabbit. Well, that was all she wrote. I walked into the living room at the usual time. Almost everyone was there, and breakfast was already been served.
成田くん朝から楽しいことでもあったの
No.
分かってしまうかね。
なんか笑ってるみたい
真の喜びとは秘めるのが難しいものなのだね。ところで玉尾はまだ降りてきていないのだろうか。
Only she and Taigi were missing.
言われてみれば今日は遅いわね普段は一番早い子なのに夜更かしでもしたのかしら
She did, but not of her own volition.
噂をすれば影と言います。
Eru looked up at the school at the second floor, spotting Tamao as she walked down the stairs. Her shoulders were slumped for some reason. Yeah, I wonder why. Also, thanks for the follow, Snopdog. Snopdog1. No relation to Snoop Dogg.
Ohayo, Tamao.
My greeting made her jump back 3 meters, all the way to the second floor, but she failed to stick the landing and tumbled down to us. So she went down the stairs, jumped all the way back up, and then fell back down the stairs. Okay.
朝から面白いことをするなら自分がカメラ持ってる時にしてください。今度から朝食の時も装備しておきますが。
The act produced quite a sound, not surprising considering the impressive fall.
脅かすなよ。
She stood up and said that in a monotone voice.
脅かすなよって玉を
Yeah?
玉緒ちゃん今すごいことにならなかった？
She's fine physically, just some things may have happened last night that have shook her that shook her mental. But you don't need to worry about that.
頭打っておかしくなりましたか？超最悪です。
The girls looked at her with a strange expression, with strange expressions, as Tamao walked over to her seat in a somewhat robotic manner. This was bad. Had she overheated because of last night's events? Yes. In a sense. She was so pure. The mere sight of her threatened to make me break out into a wide grin. Somehow I quickly realized it was best to treat her with caution until she calmed down. I had to act normal. As normal as you usually act.
Ohayo, Tamao.
おはよう。
After she took a seat and froze like a statue, an awkward air permeated the room.
おはよう。良い朝だね。
It sure is. The other man in the dorm belatedly walked down the stairs. The awkward mood continued, but no one wanted to question Tamao further, so we all began eating breakfast. After breakfast, we left for class.
きちんとついてきているかね？
大丈夫に決まってんだろ。俺を誰だと思ってんだよ。
I worried about her, so I decided to accompany her, but she simply acted strange the whole time, and that served to solidify my concerns. She got ahead of me one moment, only to fall behind the next, and aside from that, she swiped sides often as she followed me with awkward movements. She reminded me of a Maltese dog, which I found quite charming. We at Wells all took our seats in the back rows. Mr. Kino conducted the first lesson of the day. The class had nearly 100 students from all years. The academy mostly had specialized classes with a limited number of students, so this was particularly large. This was a particularly large class.
おはようございます、玉緒お姉様。何語ですか？それに、さっきも廊下で規制上げてなかったですか？
She doesn't know how to speak anymore.
規制なんて上げてないぞ。あれは気合。そう、気合を入れてたんだよ。
玉緒ちゃん、朝から変だよね。階段から落ちてたし。
むしろ、あれを階段から落ちたという空子の頭脳を心配しやがれです。
あれはトレーニングだ。
Tamao tried to act normal, but everyone could tell that something was off. Unable to calm down, she looked around like a headless chicken.
玉緒ちゃん、教科書上下逆になってる。
That analogy doesn't work on so many on so many levels. Mainly the fact that a headless chicken wouldn't be able to look around because it doesn't have a fucking head.
おお、宣告承知ですよ。ご心配ください。
本当に大丈夫？言葉遣いまでおかしいわよ。
不審者発見。学園内で不良風の女がガクガク震える事案が発生です。
あのね、昔庭師の人から聞いたことがあるんだけど、チェーンソーを使い続けると手が震えるようになるんだって。
That's the same as any power tool that shakes a lot.
どうして今そんな話を？
玉緒は夜な夜なチェーンソーを使っていて、ついにこうして後遺症が出たわけかね。
床下開くと大肉片小肉片がザックザクです。
You know, it's the same way for a lawnmower or a whippersnipper or a power washer. I was going to say gurney, but you know, most people know of it as a power washer, mostly because of the game. I wonder who they'd belong to. No, it wasn't even a question that she'd silenced and disposed of those who discovered her secret. Not that I wanted that to be true.
財宝っぽく言ってもそんなの嬉しくないわよ。
Apparently, Tamao hadn't even listened to us.
ところで
She suddenly jumped up like there was a spring in her chair.
今度は何？
もしもだ。これは仮の話だぞ。
The girls urged her to continue, but she had trouble speaking. The blush on her neck had spread all the way to her ears. After shaking her head, she swung her fist to gather her resolve.
仮の話だけどよ。お前ら好きな人ができたらどうすんだよ。ほら言え。
は？好きな人？まずは趣味とかを聞いて少しお話しして、それからあとは若い二人に任せてみたいな。
You know, like you did with Naruto.
僕ならメイドを派遣して毎日24時間の行動スケジュールを逐一報告してもらおう。
For better or worse, a man broke into the awkward girls talk Tamao had initiated. Taigi casually walked into the classroom. A maid walked by his side carrying his bag.
おはようございます、皆様。大義様、おかばんでございます。
There's number one. You can tell because the bow tie is red.
ああ、では終業まで外にいてくれ。
かしこまりました。
After he'd joined the Etoiles, I realized that Taigi had quite a high-level fetish. Unless it was a public setting, he had that maid with him at all times.
相変わらず趣味がいい。素晴らしく、実にいい。
そこまで褒められるのは恐縮だね。
Our beloved Insignia looked at us like we were gum stuck to her shoes, but we were completely serious.
大義、さっきみたいなのはストーカー行為というんじゃ。
Of course not.
愛だよ。愛するからこそ全てを知りたいと思う。当然の欲求だろ？
大義の言うこともちょっとだけわかるかな。
分かってどうしますか？ストーカー爆誕×2。最悪の事情で1000万パワーの最悪です。
Why has Eru started doing this? Why has Eru started saying that everything fucking sucks? The relations between the Crowns and Taigi seemed complicated. I heard they'd known each other long before he joined the Etoels, especially Sorako, but we already saw that in the flashback, and the interaction between Sorako and Taigi that one time. Saku, for example, was among the first of the Academy's students, and though Taigi wasn't a student himself, he had spent much time on campus. It wasn't strange that they were acquainted. Though even they were confused by his sudden enrollment, it might have been akin to having a neighbor suddenly become family. Also, he was Chim Mikado's son, so that it made it seem like he had some ulterior motive, or like you, and that made the situation even more confusing. However, Saku did her best to perform the insignia's duties.
私なら偶然を装って曲がり角でぶつかるとかするかもしれないわね。
She did her best to fix the awkward mood and help her friend. It felt quite pathetic and made me want to cry, though.
そんなのベタなラブコメすぎます。エルなら毎日切ない夜を過ごす寂しい女です。10万でどうか私を抱いてください。的なメールを。
Classic scam email.
もうマジで使えねえなお前ら。
いや、そんな唐突にキレられても。
Tranquility and warmth. Unlike when I was acting to fulfill my goals, I felt like I was wasting my time. It was a luxurious moment I'd rarely experienced over the past 7 years. Feeling that and other things, I watched the girls interact until class began. Lunch break. I thought of eating with the other Etoels, but Tamao ran off the moment class ended. She'd acted strange throughout the whole lesson. It had even gotten so bad that Mr. Kino asked if she felt unwell. Sorako did her best to cover for her, but she often overdid it. It ended with Tamao becoming a ventriloquist dummy and Eru secretly taking photos with her camera. The whole thing had been so fun that I almost burst into laughter a few times. However, Saku stopped me. How, you ask? By silencing me with the most murderous of glares, of course. It felt like she blamed me for everything, which seemed both shocking and uncalled for to me. Sure, I was one of the reasons for her odd behavior, but I certainly never expected Tamao's excessive reactions. Yeah, it's not my fault that I kissed her. I found Tamao out in the garden as I walked back from the cafeteria. Looking quite weary, she slept on the lawn and looked up at the clouds with an exhausted expression on her face. Eru stealthily snuck up on her like a carnivorous fish.
観察&観測。
Tamao attempted to jump to her feet upon hearing the sound of the shutter. Confusing Eru for me, she leaped rather high, but she failed to land properly and fell.
何が起こった一体。
Probably not a good idea to say Narita's name in front of Eru. I wanted an answer to that question as well. How could she have possibly mistaken Eru for me? That aside, that looked painful. You don't need to overreact that much, Sorako.
血は出てないわ。落ち着きなさい、ソラコ。あなたはいつも心配性すぎる。
今日の玉尾くんはとても愉快だね。
面白がってばかりもいられないわ。
これは失敬した。君はインシグニアだ。 仲間の不調は気にかかるところだったね。
Eri lowered her stance and hurried over to Tamao like a spider.
恋愛というのは、あの変人にですか？
No. Eri pointed at me, making me the center of attention. The few younger girls who heard her looked at me in despair, like they'd just stepped on a mine. After about 3 seconds, everyone shifted their gazes back to Tamao.
そうなの？しかも相手は成田？
Well, you're gonna answer, Tamao? The hesitant question made Tamao sweat and turn stiff, like someone had just pulled a knife on her.
ないないない、ありえない成田、俺ないない絶対ない。さっきの話は全部仮定。もしもだから。
She shook her head and denied it so desperately that she started speaking in a monotone voice.
玉緒ちゃん。玉緒ちゃん、そうなんだ。
Don't say you too, that's gonna make me feel bad.
我が家の筋肉までハニートラップに落ちました。
最悪。
Now dear Insignia collapsed and grabbed her head.
成田、あなた、玉緒に何をしたの？
Oh, you know, I just snuck her out of the academy and confessed my feelings to her and then kissed her after. Nothing major.
何をしたのとは？
I may have also, you know, found out her secret and bandaged her up and saw her naked, but, you know, you don't need to worry about that part either. I looked back at them, finally realizing that I was indeed involved with their conversation and blinked once.
ありていに言うなら、どうやら私は玉緒を深く愛していたらしいのだよ。なので昨夜そう告げたところ、玉緒も
Don't say she also. Tamao got up and closed in on me like a bullet, and then she grabbed my hand and pulled me out of the garden. We left a trail of dust behind as we rushed off. Very subtle. Tamao stopped once we got a good distance away from the others. It felt like all the dragging had extended my arm.
何言ってんだ成田、わけわからないこと言いやがって。
I chose not to point out the fact that she was the one who appeared insane all morning.
私は自分の心を素直に告げただけだよ。
何が？
言葉を偽ることは簡単だ。それは人の心さえたやすくねじ曲げる。もちろん私は必要ならどんな嘘でもつける男だ。
Yeah, and I would never lie to a maiden.
だからこそ自分の本心に嘘はつきたくないと思う。
Indeed, my feelings for her were very real. I had no idea that the hateful avenger Shinri Narita would still had something like that in him. A heart that could love, even if it was sinful and would surely become a weakness.
玉緒を好きだという私の心に嘘はないよ。
好き。
Heat filled her face once more. I almost spotted steam rising off her reddened forehead.
そもそもどうして逃げてきたのだね。この学園の規則に男女交際禁止の項目があるとは聞いたことがないが。
Yeah, but it's because it's Tamao who's in a relationship. And with you, no less. I wasn't the type to read instructions, so I still didn't know the academy's rules very well. But from what I could tell, though traveling in and out of the academy was strictly forbidden, what went on inside the walls wasn't so strictly governed. Of course, you had to keep it within the boundaries of nobility. However, during my nightly expeditions, I spotted a few couples having a very good time.
恋の恥じらいという情緒は理解できるが、 二人が互いに好意を抱いているのは隠す必要もないのではなかろうか。
What does he mean by a very good time? Like, were they fucking or were they just making out? Tamao let out a strange scream. Tamao started writhing, so I quickly pulled her closer to me.
成田、何をいきなり、いくらなんでもこんなところで。ダメだ、こんな昼間からなんてダメだ。
She turned all red and shook her head, but also closed her eyes and stuck out her lips.
ダメだ成田。
Her actions worried me. Could I have done anything to fix her odd behavior? Probably not.
落ち着けたもん。声を出すな。見るといい。あの茂みの奥にレンズが見える。
Tamao's expression turned blank. When it mattered, Tamao Akihito automatically changed her state of mind. And no matter what thoughts she had in her head, she instantly shifted into the mindset of a murderer.
今更言うまでもないが、この学園内で学生は常に監視されている。玉尾はどの程度承知してた？
To keep us from being overheard, I whispered those words into her ear while pretending to embrace her.
監視されてるってのはおおよそ。あんな場所に仕掛けてあるのまでは知らなかった。
The students weren't informed of the fact, of course, but the academy was being observed in a variety of ways. A whopping 200 HMIs studied here. There were both possibilities and dangerous bombs. The tall walls around the academy served to keep the dangers inside just as much as they kept enemies out. I didn't find any listening devices or cameras in the dorms, but there were devices that recorded vibrations on the walls to eavesdrop on conversations, so I'd assumed we had no privacy.
あのカメラは一昨日まではなかった。おそらく新たに設置されたものだろう。我々が森に近づいたことで警戒を厳重にしたと見るべきだな。もっとも学園を厳戒態勢に置くほどの対応まではしていないようだが。
まあ慣れてんだよ。ここを探りに来たのは別に俺や成田が初めてじゃねえし。当然その手のドジな泥棒まがいは生きて帰れてないんだけどな。
確かにアンチハローメンのような HMI 差別主義者からすればスクールは敵の巣窟だ。手を出してくるのは当然か。
なあ成田、
何かね。
連中どうしてそんな無駄なことすんだろうな。そりゃ HMI が怖いってのはわかるよ。でも HMI の数なんて普通の人間と比べりゃ一握り以下だ。ほっときゃいいじゃん。
時の女子の講義を聞いていなかったのかね。 HMI の発生率は年々増加傾向にあるのだよ。
増えてるって言ったって知れてるだろ。
今はそうでもいずれ社会的影響力を持つようになる。たとえ数で劣っても HMI はハローを持つ。多数派であるコロスがいつの日か弱者に転落するかもしれない。彼らの恐怖はそれなりに理のあることだよ。
Yeah, and until we get a My Hero Academia situation where most of humanity are HMIs, you're gonna have to deal with this.
おお、なるほど。意外と頭いいな成田。
ま、所詮モテるものである我々がこんな場所で分け知り顔で語ってみたところで皮肉としか言えないがね。それよりもスクールの警備についてだが。
A mere invasion of the forest wouldn't have pushed him over the edge, but he still topped up his security protocols. Kurofune Mikado was no pushover. I really couldn't underestimate him.
侵入者は誰一人として生かして返さないと言わんばかり。どうやら奴は秘密を探られるのがよほど都合が悪いらしい。
警戒を強めたってことは、俺たちが相手の本丸に近づきつつあるってことだよな。
Who would have guessed that their most guarded facility will be where they house most of their secrets?
さすがは玉尾、良い読みだ。
She looked directly at me without breaking out of my embrace.
成田、お前、本気？
学園の秘密に近づくのに協力するという件なら。
In that moment, she wasn't the straightforward girl she was at noon, or the attack dog I met at night. For the first time ever, she seemed entirely sincere. Thus, I found myself unable to lie to her.
そっちもあれだけど、そうじゃなくて、俺のこと好きとか好きじゃないとかさ。
本気だ。偽りなく真剣に。私は玉を好いているよ。
Humans survived by killing, relying on, or taking from others. We were so weak that we couldn't survive without forming communities, yet we couldn't tolerate walking alongside others unless we hid our true natures. Humans were warped, failed beasts who ravaged this very planet for their own gain. However, beyond that inner wasteland, there was a little light. It wasn't gentle. It could bring warmth, but it could also scorch and tear us apart with pain. It created hesitation and weakness. It was a function we'd acquired to ensure our survival, our emotional hearts. And you couldn't abandon its light. After all, it was the only thing that separated humans from monsters.
悪い冗談とでも思っていたのかね。
そりゃそうだろう。こんなの、俺そういうの今まで一度も言われたことなかったし。
玉尾はどうやら良い出会いに巡り合えなかったらしい。自信を持って小ぶりな胸を張りたまえ。見えるものには君の美しさが本物であると確かにわかる。
俺の胸はそんなに小さくねえよ。
True, but compared to Saku, I noticed that Tamao's eyes were slightly moist.
成田は察しがついてるかもしれないけど、俺の家、赤人ってのはこっちの業界だと老舗の本格派なんだよ。
本当にあの赤人なのかね。最初に聞いた時は偶然の一致と思ったが、現存していたとは驚きだ。
まさか名前まで知ってんのかよ、成田。お前単に裏の人間ってわけじゃねえのか。
昔噂に聞いた程度だよ。おとぎ話の類と思っていたがね。
There were 8 famous families that lurked in the darkest depths of society. Collectively, they were known as the Nishihachi. They included names such as Semimaru, Akihito, and Ukon. Some were swindlers, some were murderers, some were traitors. There were legends in the underground, and few knew if they actually existed. The Akihitos were murderers, or in other words, hitmen. They accepted contracts and took out targets without any regard for morality. Kings, saints, laymen, they eliminated any and all individuals as per their requests. Thus, they were murderers.
マジもんだよ。そりゃもう古い血筋でさ。昔は鬼とか妖魔とか呼ばれてたそうだし。嘘か本当か。先祖は偉い陰陽師の手伝いとかで。要するに昔から代々こういう仕事やってるんだ。
They were legends I'd heard of as a child. However, it appeared that I'd unintentionally become a first-hand witness.
赤人の本家はさ、21世紀にもなってネットもないような山奥に隠れるみたいに住んでるんだぜ。笑えるだろ。
Well, any internet presence could be traced back to the Akihitos, so
でも最近は赤人の血も薄れて、まともに力が出るようなやつはほんの数えるほど。すっかり時代遅れの骨董品なんだよ。赤人に限ったこっちゃない。俺たちの他にまだ生きてる西八石はいるけど、どいつもこいつも時代に置いていかれたガラクタに違いない。
yeah, if only the heirs to the other Nishihachis were also cute women. What?
セミマルの姉さんとかウコンのジジイとか殺しても死にそうにないやつもいるけどな。俺は生まれつきの呪い持ちだから、ガキの頃からこの業界でプロやってた。学校っつっても転校ばっかだし、つかまともに学校行ったのとか数えるぐらいだし。嬉しかったよ。好きって言ってくれたの。俺のこと綺麗だって褒めてくれたの。言われてみたかったんだ。仕事でさ、学生に混じっても、まあ俺ヤンキーみたいだから誰も近寄ってこないんだけど、でも傍から見てると他のやつらは楽しそうで、ああいうのいいなって。嬉しすぎて今日はちょっとはしゃぎすぎちゃったけど。
玉尾。
でもぶっちゃけ俺とお前敵同士だ。
Brief and conviction colored her words.
かもしれない。
Wait. Brief. Brief and conviction?
かもか。まあそうだよな。お前の正体調べてやろうと思ったけど、もうどうでもいいか。最後までうまくやっていけたらいいよな。望み薄そうだけど。
本当にいいのかね。
嬉しかったのは本当だから。この先がどうなるとしたってこれでいいよ。
私も嬉しかったよ。君は忘れていた大切なことを思い出させてくれた。だから私は選んだ。この先に待つものも罪深さも全て承知で運命を受け入れた。後悔はしない。己の選んだことだ。
そっか。俺もそうだよ。後悔しない。だって自分で決めたんだもんな。成田がどういうつもりでこの学園に来たのかは知らないけど、お互いうまくやっていこうぜ。どうせなら最後まで下手打たずにやれたらいいよな。
私は今この瞬間だけでも十分に幸福だよ。だができるなら玉尾の言う通り、幕引きの時までこの良き時間が続くことを祈っている。
What would Tamao do if she'd learned the path I walked? I had a premonition of this coming to an end, and Tamao felt it in her skin. However, I gathered my resolve to prepare for that. I had to in order to keep my hesitation at bay.
それであの森どう攻めるんだ。
She looked up at me with the face of a pro, doing her best to hide her emotions.
玉尾が先ほど言った通りだ。これだけ如実に警戒する以上、やはりあの森の奥にこの学園の秘密は眠っている。
まあそうだよな。
さすがにその先をここで話すのは危険だろう。以後のことは今夜私の部屋で。
It would have been safer to do it outside the academy, but they'd up their security, so we couldn't run the risk of getting spotted. We broke our long embrace. To the cameras, they must have seemed like a happy discussion between lovers. Or this must have seemed like a happy discussion between lovers. I thought of returning to class, but I suddenly felt steam rising off of Tamao. Not like you haven't already been in his room. Her ears turned all red as she returned to her amusing self. She's been in my room before, hadn't she? Though that purity of hers was quite adorable. Suddenly from behind... Excuse me? Who do you think? It's the people who fucking... Who you ran away from.
レンズは見た。愛欲学園昼下がりのうずき。
Eru, shut the fuck up. The sound had come from Eru's camera. Apparently she'd taken a photo of us embracing it. Eru quickly did something on her phone. It probably involved the photo she'd just taken.
どうぞ成田。自分の自信作です。証拠写真完成しました。制作時間10秒。
The photo showed me embracing Tamao and whispering something directly into her ear. That alone looked good enough, but she'd also edited it to add some flowers and hearts around us.
ほほう、これは見事だ。ぜひ後でデータのコピーを。
写真は消せても若い体のほてりのままに愛を貪った事実は消せないのです。
Yeah, that memory has been burned into Eru's eyes.
ほてってねえよ。適当なこと抜かすな。
自分ネット拡散大好きなキャラですので。
鬼か。
Eru ran away, so Tamao chased after her. Naturally, Eru had no actual chance of getting away, regardless of what she tried. Tamao eventually grabbed her by the neck and carried her away like a cat would a kitten. I had some preparations to make, first for tonight, but eventually... I'm coming for you, Korofune Mikado. We had a dinner lesson. We sat in pairs and learned proper etiquette. My partner for the night, Saku, heaved a long sigh. Yeah, why couldn't it have been Tamao?
どうかしたのかね。
エルが写真をメールしてくれて。
Of course she did. The one she'd taken at noon, surely it seemed she'd actually escaped Tamao. The one at noon, surely. The one taken at noon, surely. And she'd even managed to spread it among the other crowns. Eru Takazaki was no joke. I'm sure Eru emailed the other crowns while getting chased by Tamao, and that was the only way she would have been able to keep the photo. She would have been able to send the photo before it was eventually deleted after she got caught.
良い出来の写真だった。私はあれを見て胸に熱いものがこみ上げたよ。君の感想はどうかね。
うわーという気分よ。もう突然すぎて、なんて反応したらいいのか。
She's not wrong. It hasn't been that long since the route started, and they're already together. I mean, there's gonna be a lot more stuff that happens, but, you know, I didn't expect Nari to confess to Tamao so quickly. Her face made it clear that she was on the verge of collapsing.
愛は育てるものだが、恋は落ちるものだ。恋とはいつも突然にやってくる。
これだけは言っておくわ。
She aimed her resolute gaze at me.
タマオは 私の大事な友達だから。
A resolute gaze at me.
よく知っている。
もしもいい加減なことで彼女が不幸になったりしたら、私我慢できないと思う。
Well, as long as I make her unhappy with something sensical, I'm sure it'll be fine. Well, those words suited her, and hearing them brought me great comfort. She didn't know. The Crowns, Tamao included, didn't know. They didn't know Shinri Narita's true goal. Shinri Narita never hesitated. He was an avenger who mercilessly ended his target's life in order to sate his desires, even if it brought misery to others. And his actions would surely bring about many tragedies at the academy. Would Sakawa Tanashi tolerate that?
よく肝に銘じておこう。
You know, as long as your actions are sensical, she won't get mad. Today was a peaceful day. The afternoon encounter had helped me understand Tamao a lot better. As I sat on the chair and pondered various things, it became an hour past lights out.
そろそろ頃合いか。
After I muttered that, I heard a knock on the door.
開いている。入りたまえ。
おう。
The door slowly opened up, and Tamao peeked inside. She came to visit, just as we'd agreed. She snuck into the center of the room and sat down, looking as meek as a kitten before bowing down.
お邪魔いたします。
物々しいことだね。この前も入ったばかりだろ。いきなり正座とは何かの試合でもするのかね。
What was that? What was that whistle? Flustered, she turned all red and jumped up a whole 40 centimeters. I quickly ran up to her and covered her mouth. Good thinking.
落ち着いて静かにしたまえ。この時間ではまだ起きている者もいる。下手に騒いでまた誰か来たら。
Sako and Sorako were on the second floor, but Era was my neighbor. She had excellent hearing, and if she heard something here, she would likely come over to investigate. Right after I moved to pin Tamao and keep her voice down, I heard a knock on the door.
何か騒がしいみたいだけど、成田くんどうかした？何か手助けが必要そうなら僕が手伝うけど。
Don't worry about it, Sorako. Wait your turn when it's your route. When it's time for your route. Speaking of the devil, no, Sorako's room was located upstairs and a bit to the side. Had she actually picked up on the noise and walked over to help? That seemed a little fast, no? She was probably in the kitchen, right? What a devilish ear. Did that talent of hers have anything to do with her tendency to help others? Or had the ability formed as a result of her nature? Humans had some rather fearsome hidden powers. Regardless, I realized it would have been bad for us if she found Tamao here, past lights out, in this situation. I had to hide this somehow.
いや、一人で老若男女の数人が騒ぐ声を練習していてね。私の電気ビデオを制作する際に必要なのだよ。
These are some outlandish excuses, but they don't sound they don't sound implausible when said by Narita.
そうだったんだ。でもさっきは若い男女の声しか聞こえなかったけど。
恥ずかしながらまだ練習中なのでね。しかし部屋にいてそこまで聞き分けたのかね。素晴らしい。私から君にゴールデンゴッドイヤーの称号を贈ろう。
そんな褒めてもらうようなことじゃ。でもそういう事情なら練習頑張ってね。
Oh, she really did come. She really did just hurry her ass from her room downstairs to Narita's.
それじゃあ、おやすみなさい。お邪魔しちゃってごめんね。あと、どうせなら、もう少し早い時間に練習した方がいいんじゃないかな。
心に留めておこう。おやすみ、空子。君が心安らかに眠ることを祈っている。
それじゃあ、おやすみなさい。お邪魔しちゃってごめんね。あと、どうせなら、もう少し早い時間に練習した方がいいんじゃないかな。一応、ここは集団生活の場だから。
Oh, there we go. I heard her walk away. She must have returned to her room. Everyone was unique indeed. I didn't expect her to have such a side to her.
さて、玉尾も落ち着いたかね。
Yeah, you're gonna be quieter now.
おう、すまん。
Did the word match make her think of something sexual? She had a tendency to strongly deny anything to that vein, but what if she was actually quite interested in the subject? I wanted to look into the matter, but we had other priorities.
まず、こいつを見てもらおう。
She pulled out 2 micro SD cards.
中身は何だね。
She turned on her laptop and used it to scan one of the cards.
1枚目は、ここの学生のプロフィールデータが入ってる。手間はかかったけど、ほぼ全学生分揃えられた。
これは、詳細なデータだな。
ここのサーバーで実際に管理してるやつだから。
Dates, places of birth, records of their past, medical histories, family trees, etc. You even had their achievements in the academy, grades, notable personality points, and stages in the curriculum. Though it contained nothing but about their halos.
これだけのデータを手に入れられたのは大したものだ。
Those were my honest thoughts. Sure, I didn't know whether she cracked the system or used some other route, but none of that mattered. I actually had some of this data. Takeshi Hanazono had acquired it as part of my request. However, the main server's information didn't illuminate Korofune's true goal. Naturally, Halo details and information about the secrets of the Academy were difficult to access from the outside. The system that hid those probably hadn't been connected to any other.
これ見て、成田はどう思う？意見聞かせてくれよ。
全員が HMI だが、それ以外にことさら異常な点はないようだね。
次はこっちだ。
She said that, then placed the second card in the slot and accessed the file. It showed OCR scans of some newspaper articles. The dates and locations mentioned on each article were different, but they were all reports of deaths. There were accidents, illnesses, suicides, and far more, and none of them seemed extraordinary. However, I knew she was showing them to me for a reason.
どうだ、成田。
Tamao was emotional, but no fool. Instead of telling me the truth right away, she asked for my unbiased opinion on the matter.
死んでいるのは学生か類する年少者ばかりか。
The first list has students who had enrolled at the academy. They were all alive, of course. So, what was the relation between it and these articles? Soon enough, I realized that the notable things were the locations. The places the students were from and the places mentioned in the obituaries nearly matched. I had no map on hand, so I couldn't confirm the exact distance, but the article alone made that fact clear. Some were in the same prefectures, while others in the same towns. Had something happened near their homes? Acts of terror that targeted their relatives, perhaps? No, It was the opposite. The incidents didn't coincidentally happen where these students came from. Rather, they were caused by people capable of enrolling into the academy. Basically, HMIs.
素質ある学生たちをスカウトする過程で何らかの事情で死者が出るとでも言うのか？
How did those two events connect? I had a few guesses, but I couldn't decide too early. I still lacked information.
それが事実なら分かっているだけでも死者は数百人。それが全て学園にまつわる死者だとすれば。なるほど。
成田、ミトリはやっぱりもう死んじゃってるのかな？
No. Hopefully not. Tamao had almost never mentioned Mitori since her disappearance. And that clearly hadn't been because she wanted to forget the friend who had left. She had a solid guess involving what had happened to her. Even I, the transfer student, was shocked when Mitori Kubotoyama vanished. It must have hit Tamao quite hard. Especially since it was no ordinary parting.
サクも言ってたけど、友達だった俺たちに一言の相談もなしにいきなり退学するなんて、どう考えても信じられない。おかしいよ。最初からうすうすそうなんじゃないかと思ってたけど、考えるのが怖かったんだ。
She looked down at the floor.
スクールの途中退学者は結構多いんだ。数ヶ月ごとに1人か2人くらいは辞めていって、代わりに新しいやつが入ってくる。特殊な学園だし、あぶれる人数としたら適正だろうって見過ごしてた。
ミトリについては調べさせた。
As I sat behind her, I told her something I'd hoped to hide.
調べさせた？
聞くかね。喜ばしい知らせではないと先に言っておこう。
知ってるんなら教えてくれよ。ミトリがどうなったのか。俺みたいなやつでも嘘ついてたけどよくしてくれたんだ。友達だから知りたいよ。どんなことでも。
She seemed sincere, so I couldn't lie.
兜山ミトリは病死している。
Well, shit.
学園から籍を抜いてすぐ後だ。少なくとも公式な書類ではそうなっている。
I'd had Hishia look into it. Mitori's family had a lot of history behind it, so not even Kurofune Mikado could hide what happened completely. Yeah, had a lot of history
他の
behind
退
it.
学者についても行方を追わせているが、そちらは芳しくない。転居などで消息のつかめなくなっているケースが多くてね。2件のみ判明したが、どちらも死亡している。病死と事件に巻き込まれての死亡だ。この分では他の退学者の行方も知れたものではないだろう。
If them dropping out was just a front for their death, if them dropping down was just a front for their death, what had happened to them? Was it an accident or did the academy purge them? And in the latter case, why? This was surely related to the academy's dark secret. Death loomed over the search for new students, and those who left seemed to vanish.
深い闇だ。真実は深淵の底。たどり着くにはあの森を越えねばなるまい。さて、玉尾。
As I started to ask about her plans, I realized how silent she'd been, and upon closer inspection, I noticed a tear streaming down her cheek.
泣いているのか？
Tamao put her hand on her cheek, as if she had only just noticed. A moment later, another tear escaped her eye.
どうして涙なんて出てるんだろう。これっておかしいよ。成田もそう思うだろう。この程度で汚れがなくなんてバカみたいだ。
玉尾、
赤い人なんだぜ俺。人死になんて珍しくもなんともない。数えきれないぐらい見たし、自分でも今さら友達がいなくなって悲しいとか。
何もおかしくはない。人間とはそういう傲慢な生き物だ。肉まんの敵を笑って殺戮する傍らで、傷ついた一人の身内のために天をつくように嘆き悲しむ。そんなどしがたいわがままを我々は悲劇と呼んでは飾り立てる。それを幾億幾兆と積み重ねたものが人の歴史だ。地獄の名には死んだ後の行き場ではなく、今生きているこの場所こそがふさわしい。
Shinri Naruto himself was an avenger born of one such tragedy. And the Akihitos were the very representation of the murderous, ravenous nature of mankind.
そっか。そうだよな。
それでも人は自分以外のもののために嘆くことができる。傲慢であろうとわがままであろうと、他人を思って流れる涙は等しく尊いと私は思う。だから玉緒は泣いてもいいのだよ。
お前変な慰め方するんだな。俺さ、生まれた時から業界の人間だから、今までまともに友達とかいなかったんだ。
The unexpected tears made Tamao reveal what she'd been holding inside. It was less about telling me about it, and more about organizing her thoughts.
赤人の人間で、おまけに HMI ってさ、バカみたいだよな。もうフルコースって感じだろ。何も知らない頃は当たり前だって思ってた。仕事で外へ出るようになって、世間の、要するに普通のやつと比べたらさすがに自分たちがおかしいんだって理解した。一回マジで鬱陶しくなって家飛び出したこともあるんだぜ。
赤人が嫌になったのか。
俺そこまで可愛げはねえよ。言った通り単に鬱陶しかったんだ。同い年ぐらいの他のやつが遊んだり騒いだりしてて、ああいうのももしかしたら楽しいのかなって。でも当然赤人はそういうの許すわけないしさ。それで飛び出した反抗期の一種かもな。
Tamao chuckled lightly.
でもダメだったな。結局どこ行っても馴染めなくて、やっぱり俺は呪い持ちの化け物だったよ。犬と狼はよく似てるけど別物だろ。形が似てるから俺も真似できるかって思ったけど、真似は真似さ。本物じゃないからうまくいかなかったんだ。今だってここの学生みたいな顔してるけど、他の連中みたいにはなりきれない。とんだ大根役者ってわけさ。結局のところ生まれた時から赤人で、骨も肉も全部それでできてる。なのに人間ですみたいな顔したってすぐボロが出るよな。
To prove they were normal, mankind needed abnormalities to shun. Tamao was born a HMI and an Akihito, a born murderer. Society was set to ostracize her from the very start. I had no idea what she'd experienced after she ran away from home, and she herself didn't elaborate. However, it was enough to make this cheerful girl give up.
のスクールに来て初めて友達ってのがどういう意味なのか分かったんだ。俺こんななりだろ、ヤンキーキャラでさ。関わってくるやつがいないから仕事の時は便利なんだぜ。ここに来た時もやっぱ距離置かれちゃってて、静かでいいかとか思ってそのままぼっちやってたら、何をどう勘違いしたのかサクたちがわざわざ向こうから話しかけてきやがった。
Saku Watanashi had said that anyone could smile here. Didn't that mean the hive of abnormality that was the academy was her promised land? Or perhaps not, since her stay here had been sustained by her own and the academy's lies. She'd arrived at the academy quite a while ago, so how had she failed to uncover its secrets thus far? Had she subconsciously stole the job because she was afraid of ending this momentary peace? No, that was an ugly question. Even if that was true, I couldn't have blamed her for it. Even I, Shinri Narita, had found some solace in this grey garden. The place felt like a lone, shining, priceless gem. I almost wanted to thank Kurofune for that.
本当に大切な友人だったのだね。
畜生
She furrowed her brow and voiced her frustration.
畜生畜生、こいつを仕組んでるやつら全員この手で緑たちと同じ目に合わせてやりてえ。
Only punish? So you don't want to, kill? I finally realized that even if she was an Akihito, Tamao was actually an honest girl who loved her friends. However, she entered the academy as an enemy, so she had to constantly betray them by keeping her secrets. That unchangeable truth must have tormented her. And those words just now were born out of anger for failing to protect Motori.
成田
Her voice sounded confused and meek. Unable to bear the sight, I embraced her from behind. For once, she didn't panic or try to escape. She simply gave in to my warmth and leaned into my chest. I couldn't just say that it must have been hard for her. That was something only she herself could gauge. Instead, I merely wished to ease her burdens in whatever way possible.
以前私が受け取った言葉を君にも手渡そう。変化を恐れるな。起こってしまったことをやり直す術はないが、そこから先、自分にできることは必ず何かある。過去と未来を恐れず、一歩を踏み出したまえ。
成田
She looked up to me with red eyes, then wiped away her remaining tears and formed a resolute expression.
俺はスクールをこのままにしておけない。放っておいたらこれからもきっと何人も死ぬ。知っちまった以上黙っていられるか。この事件俺の事件だ。何もかもこの手で終わらせてやる。なんだよ成田、柄でもないとか思ってんのか。
Timao bashfully looked up at me.
ふむ、そんなことを思っている風に見えたのかね。残念ながら今考えていたのは玉緒が美しいということだよ。
突然何言ってやがんだ。
I didn't see any reason to be so bashful around someone she'd already kissed, but that innocence of hers made her all the more lovable.
伝説によれば、西の赤人は殺し屋だ。依頼を受ければ殺して、善も悪も王侯聖者俗人も区別なく、殺すことで等しくする。故に殺し屋。しかし玉緒はスクールを許せないと言った。何も知らずに殺される学生たちを救いたいと願った。
ほんと柄にもないよな。 俺みたいな裏の人間が。
うつむくな。何も知らぬまま浪費されて命を奪われる者がいる。続いたはずの命を破棄される者がいる。その現実は間違いなく悪だ。悪が間違いだと糾弾できる君の心の尊さに比べれば、君が何者であるかなどさまつでしかない。偽善だと蔑む輩には好きに言わせておけ。君は私のような半端者とは違う。胸を張って信じるところを成したまえ。迷っていては救われる者たちに笑われるぞ。約束通り私は玉緒の願いを手伝おう。同じ道を行ける限り。それがどこまでかは私にもわからないが。
Tamao closed her eyes and slowly placed her hand over mine.
俺、今度こそあの森の向こうに隠された秘密を暴いてやる。
素晴らしい決意だ。しかしまずは怪我を癒すのが先決だろう。
あの程度の怪我、もう治ったぜ。
She's healed already, but those wounds were quite severe.
いや、まさかいくらなんでも見せてみたまえ。
She looked at me clearly confused, but I didn't hesitate. Instead, I stripped her of her clothing at lightning fast speeds.
ははは、お代官様ご無体でございますぞ。
Her top and bottom disappeared in less than 3 seconds, leaving her in just her simple underwear.
待てこれはいくらなんでも待て。
待つのは君だ、玉緒。分かっているのか。騒げば隣室に声が届いてしまうぞ。
Tamao panicked, but she understood the dangers of being seen like that in a man's room, so she screamed. So her scream faded.
いきなり何すんだよ、成田。
Her bashfulness couldn't escape those sounds, so her skin reddened. She bit her lower lip and tried to bear the embarrassment. Honestly, the way she attempted to conceal her exposed skin looked extremely charming.
とても美しい。
そういうことじゃなくて、バカ野郎。
My honest thoughts made her even more bashful.
それにしても確かに回復している。
Her soft, pale skin, her glamorous, slender arms, her toned waistline, her wild legs. There were no wounds to be found on any of them.
だから治ったって言っただろ。俺はもともと頑丈なんだって。傷の治りだって早いんだから。
Oh, perhaps because of her halo. Her halo improved her physical capabilities, so it very well could have enhanced her metabolism as well. Okay, thank God they stopped. Carefully touched her pearly skin. It wasn't just that, the surface had reconnected. She was unharmed and beautiful beneath as well. Even though I touched the places where she had more serious wounds, she felt no pain.
なるほどなるほど。もうしばらく我慢したまえ。ことがことだけに身長の上にも身長を要する。
You're just teasing her at this point.
何言ってんだかわかんねえよ。
She turned meeker than ever as I thoroughly inspected her body. I rubbed her shins, then put my hands over her knees. The softness of her thighs felt otherworldly. Her skin so smooth you couldn't see any pores, with tension that even the smallest droplet of water would have bounced off of. A pleasant scent wafted off her chest, and her softness was hard to describe. Her flat stomach, which showed no sign of fat, suited her perfectly.
実に素晴らしい。
もういいだろ。十分だよ。怪我全部治ってるだろ。
まだ十分ではないと思う。
どうして？
無論、めでるためだ。
Huh? She almost went berserk again, but I calmed her down.
静かにしたまえ。これ以上騒げば、サクたちが気づいてのっぴきならないことになってしまうぞ。
またそれか。俺を脅してどうすんだよ。
おとなしく騒がずに炎上のシミでも数えていることだ。何すぐに終わる。もっとも終わる頃には自分からねだるようになっているだろうがね。
This is... what?
だろうがね。じゃねえよバカ。ちくしょ。さっきのセリフでちょっとでもかっこいいとか思った俺が大バカだった。
Ignoring Tamao's protests, I continued examining every part of her.
変なとこ触んな。
玉尾は全身に怪我を負っていた。確かめるには全身に触れねばならないだろう。
The sensation on my hands was pleasant by itself, but the sounds she made when I touched the more sensitive places were truly something. After checking her ribcage, I moved to her soft upper arms. As I moved from the collarbone to her back, I felt like I was touching a new enameled product. I truly enjoyed the feeling. However, when I smiled in satisfaction and took a break, Tamao spoke.
それで感想は。
とても柔らかく素敵だったと思う、玉尾。
My honest opinion made her look away and let out a gasp.
いや、素敵とかそんなの言うなよ。俺裏の人間なんだぜ。
先ほども言わなかったかね。なるほど。人は過去や自分の立場から逃れられない。だからといってその過去で持てる正しさや行いのすべてが否定されるわけではない。
本当にそう思うか。
She looked at me with a slightly gloomy expression on her face.
俺いろんなことしてきた。何人も始末したし、悪事の片棒担いだことだってあるんだぜ。
変わらない過去を嘆いても何一つ始まらない。玉尾が過去を悔いているのなら、それに勝る未来を築くよう努めればいい。罪とは消えないものだ。過去はついて回る。後ろ指さす者もいるだろう。だがそれに負けて未来を捨てるのは、過去の全てが無意だったと認めてしまうことだ。道を歩んだ者には歩んだだけの責任がある。それは歩み続けることでしか返せない。
The blood split. The blood spilled. The lives taken. Those who supported us. The things we'd thrown away or simply ignored. Those who walked down the path of carnage carried everything they'd done with them.
迷ってもいい。望むなら進む道を変えるのもいいだろう。どんな道であれ、信じて胸を張って進め。敗れるときは全力を尽くして敗れたまえ。
それが俺の責任か。
生まれや育ちがどうであれ、玉尾の輝きは本物だ。私は知っている。それで十分ではないのかね。
何を言ってやがんだよ。ったく、口だけ達者な男は信用するなって昔ばあちゃんが言ってた。
君は本物の清楚な乙女だ。やはり 乙女とは核あるべきだ。
成田は清楚なのが好き。
思考としてはそうだが、今は玉緒の方がもっと愛おしい。
Good answer. Tamao shook in embarrassment. Her damp eyes shone like jewels, and the profound color seemed to suck my heart in.
君は誰よりも美しい。以前と同じ質問をしよう。私は玉緒を愛している。君はどうだろう。
それは成田。私成田のこと。
Tamao looked away, seeming hesitant. I merely waited for the words that followed, and eventually, after an arm on the clock finished a lap, she gathered her courage.
俺も成田のことを好きだ。
The Japanese sometimes described silent voices as akin to mosquito buzzes, and that suited her perfectly. The joy made my mind go blank, but I controlled myself. After all, I had to keep calm. Luckily, that proved easy, for I was a master of self-denial.
これは
じゃねえだろ。
The joy had made me push Tamao down.
安心してほしい。もちろん私は勢いと成り行きでことになど及ばない。
じゃあ早くどいて。
私は玉緒が欲しい。
She looked surprised, like she didn't understand my words. And then she gasped, looked around, and stared off into the distance.
初級しすぎんだろ。
だがこうも考えている。それでいいのだろうかと。私たちはこの先どうなるかもわからない。結果、玉緒を傷つけてしまうだけではないのかと。それは私の望むところではないのだから。
Her expression changed countless times in a matter of seconds. She bit down on her lip, clenched her teeth, grinned, pouted, opened her mouth, then shuddered and faced me.
覚悟してきたから。
Hiding her eyes, she awkwardly yet resolutely said those words like we were about to duel.
今日は来るとき覚悟してきたから。こんなになったらそれでもいいって。だから
玉緒、愛している。
ここじゃなくてベッドに。
Yep. Do you like Tamao a lot more now? Yeah. I don't know what to say to that. Especially because it was like fucking how long into her round? It hasn't been that long, and we've already confessed and fucked Tamao. Okay. I would stream longer, but I'm getting tired. So you know, even though the last 2 streams were longer, that doesn't mean this is a short stream, right? But anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, a follow would be appreciated. If you want to support me further, you could always subscribe. But yeah. Tomorrow we will be playing more Hello Lady. Alright, seeing more naked Tamao sprite without seeing nipples. So it doesn't get, so I don't get banned. But yeah. With that being said, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, and I will see you guys again next time. Bye-bye.